Hello and welcome to the Tayored Expressions YouTube channel. My name is Theary and today we are getting ready for the fall season with the new garden variety Fall and Prairies dyes. So let's get started. Okay, here's a closer look at the products I will use today. For the sentiment, I am using the Happy Harvest sentiment stamps along with the coordinating dies. I am also breaking out the antique pails and the two new garden varieties, Fall and Prairies dies. And for the cardstock, I am using buttercream frosting, sugar cube, mocha, spearmint, Dijon, and toffee. I have also selected the coordinating color ink pads and a clear embossing ink pad. I am using Copic markers in the colors W1 and W2, as well as the white gel pen to add highlights and details to some of the die cut pieces. And to add a little bit of interest to our milk jug, I am using some twine. For ink blending, I love using my blender brushes and my bitty blender brushes. For extra interest to the card design, I am also using gold paint for a splattering effect. For adhesive, I am using a combination of foam squares as well as liquid adhesive. Okay, so I am starting out with garden variety Prairies dies, and I am die cutting each piece out of a different colored cardstock. My inspiration for this card design was my love for farmhouse decor, and the color spearmint was just calling out my name. I absolutely love this color. Okay, so here is everything dyed cut out on colored cardstock. The milk jug is just so cute. There's a slit on the top of the milk jug to stick all of the Prairies dies inside. But before I do that, I want to add some dimension to the die cut pieces. So going in with my blending brushes and coordinating ink pads, I am blending on the edges of the die cut pieces. I like doing this because it creates more interest in your overall card design. The inks that I use for the milk jug are spearmint and buttercream frosting. Then I use buttercream frosting and mocha to add colors to anything cut out of toffee and buttercream cardstock. I like blending with my bitty brushes onto small and delicate die cuts. It gets into all of the small areas much easier. Here I am playing around with the placement of the die cuts. I ultimately wanted to use the color spearmint for my milk jug, but decided buttercream frosting was a better choice. So here you can see that I ended up die cutting a new milk jug out of buttercream frosting and ink blend the edges of it with toffee ink. Okay, so let's talk about the background. I am using garden variety fall dies and die cutting that all out of spearmint cardstock. I am going to create a tone-on-tone background. So I cut down another piece of spearmint cardstock to 4 inches by 5¼ inches. I then start to place all of the die cut pieces on the cardstock. I want to fill up the background as much as I can with the fall leaves. And once I was happy with the placement of each, I went ahead and adhered it down with liquid adhesive. And you don't have to worry about the leaves hanging off the cardstock because we can go ahead and snip it off with our scissors. Okay, so now I am just playing around with the arrangement of my pieces. I love the various lengths and sizes in the garden variety Prairies die set. It makes it easy to create a dramatic scene when layering everything together. Okay, so once I was happy with the arrangement, I flipped it upside down and I applied a piece of washi tape to hold it in place. This is a great way to keep your design together while working on the other project parts. I like to create a mat against my card panel, and I decided to trim a piece of mocha cardstock slightly larger than my card panel. I adhered the two together using liquid adhesive. I am using the Happy Harvest stamp and dies for the sentiment. I plan on heat embossing the sentiment on mocha cardstock. I first condition my cardstock with an anti-static powder tool. Then I inked the stamp with clear embossing ink before I poured white embossing powder onto it. I later heat set the embossing powder with my heat tool. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I have trouble lining up my sentiment dies with my stamp sentiments. So what I found to be helpful is to die cut the sentiment out of scrap cardstock first. Then what you're going to do is use the negative piece to line up against the stamped sentiment to find a perfect placement. Once you figure out the correct placement, it's time to place the die into the area and tape it all down. It's fairly easy to do because the die just pops back into place. Just make sure to tape it down so that it doesn't shift. And voila, the perfect die cut piece. For my sentiment, I do like to layer the pieces together. So I did went ahead and die cut the sentiments a few times and layer that together with liquid adhesive for a dimensional effect. Okay, so before I assemble everything together, I am using Copic markers in the color W1 and W2 to add some details to the cattails. And going in with gold paint, I am splattering that all over the card panel. Initially, I only wanted to splatter the background, but then I decided to add paint splatters to the die cut pieces as well. Now using foam squares, I added that to the back of the milk jug and placed that onto the background panel. And for the sentiment, I am using a combination of foam squares and liquid adhesive to make sure that it is correctly level. Since the milk jug has already been propped up with foam squares, I didn't want to add extra foam towards that side of the milk jug. This card is almost finished. Now it's time to create my card base. I trimmed down sugar cube cardstock to 8.5 inches by 4.25 inches. I then scored it down the center using my scoreboard and my bone folder. And then going in with liquid adhesive, I adhered it down to the card base. I used my white gel pen to create highlights and details on the card panel for extra interest. And finally, to top off the card, I am using twine and wrapping it underneath the neck of the milk jug to create a nice little bow. I did add a drop of glue down to make sure that the bow was secure. And that's it! I love the dimension on this card and the shine from the gold splatter. The tone-on-tone background is a great way to add interest to your background scene without overcomplicating it. I hope you enjoy this tutorial and please remember to like and subscribe. It's a great way to get notified of any upcoming videos. Okay, until next time, I hope you have an amazing day. Bye-bye.